The doctor breathed heavily, feeling cold sweat run down his face. The tension of the moment was suffocating, tightening his throat as he tried to process the horror. His hand clenched tightly against the ground, his fingers pressing into the earth in a gesture of pure helplessness. Frustration burned, but there was nothing he could do. Everything seemed to belong to another life now. The image of that hospital, under a serene blue sky, felt like a distant and unattainable memory. There was a time when the routine was peaceful. He remembered coffee breaks and trivial conversations with colleagues, never imagining what was to come. But the normalcy was suddenly shattered. While his colleague laughed carefree, the doctor realized with a chilling shock that something was terribly wrong. Now, the reality was bloody chaos. The doctor struggled to attend to the wounded piled on the floor, desperate to find that there was no more room for anyone. Panic took over his voice. He shouted, demanding blood stoppers, begging for supplies that no longer existed in that critical situation. Exhaustion finally hit him. He bent over, panting and trembling, feeling the overwhelming weight of responsibility as the chaos continued around him. Outside, the situation was even bleaker. Armed soldiers guarded the perimeter, surrounding the bodies of those who weren't so lucky. The violence approached the medical tents. The armed men advanced tactically, ignoring the neutrality of the location and bringing the war into the refuge. The heavy sound of military boots against the ground echoed like thunder. Each step of the invaders announced that the survivors' time was running out. The siege was complete. The fragile tents, whipped by the wind, were the only remaining barrier between the terrified civilians and the squad patrolling outside. Terror invaded the makeshift shelter. The doctor instinctively placed himself in front of the woman and child, trying to protect them as fear consumed them. The threat materialized before them. A soldier suddenly appeared, raising his weapon with lethal coldness, ready to execute anyone in the way. Cornered and defenseless, they stared down the barrel of the gun. The doctor held the boy tightly, paralyzed in the face of the imminent death that awaited them. The soldier smiled maliciously, savoring the cruelty of the moment before carrying out his final attack. In an act of pure instinct, the doctor lunged forward, screaming desperately in an attempt to protect the child from imminent danger. However, the aggressor's finger did not hesitate. The weapon's mechanism clicked, sealing the fate of everyone there at that moment. A burst of bullets tore through the air. The doctor took the brutal impact in his back, serving as a human shield for the innocents. The projectiles pierced his body repeatedly, but he endured the agony, refusing to move from in front of the boy. The ammunition casing hit the ground, marking the end of the summary execution with a cold, metallic sound. The boy, trembling and terrified, called out to his savior, realizing with horror that the man who had protected him was mortally wounded. Life was quickly fading. Behind the broken glasses, the doctor's vision darkened and his consciousness began to fail. His legs finally gave way. Without the strength to stand any longer, he collapsed, his hand hitting the ground heavily. The physical pain became unbearable, consuming every fiber of his being as his mind plunged into absolute darkness. He felt as if he were plummeting into a bottomless abyss, moving away from the cruel reality of that war and his own life. Suddenly, the shock brought him back. His eyes opened abruptly, confronted by an intense and unexpected brightness. Instead of the chaos of battle, he was faced with treetops and a clear sky. The scenery had completely changed to a tranquil forest. Confused and disoriented, he remained lying on the ground, trying to understand why he was there and what had happened to the pain of death. Upon raising his arm to examine himself, however, the shock was even greater. The hand before his eyes was not that of an adult, but that of a child. The doctor looked at his own body in disbelief. He couldn't understand why he had suddenly turned into a child. Around him, the reality was brutal. Lifeless bodies lay scattered across the damp earth, victims of a recent massacre. Weapons were still firmly gripped in hands that would never move again, silent witnesses to the violence of combat. The scene was one of complete devastation. Destroyed carts and wreckage surrounded the clearing where the small survivor sat, isolated amidst the chaos. He touched his own face, stunned. The tactile sensation confirmed that this absurd situation was, in fact, real. His professional instincts took over as he examined the nearest body. The wound was precise, caused by a single fatal blow that split the victim. There were no signs of life. Wherever the protagonist looked, he found only piled-up corpses. The young boy remained there, small and vulnerable, sitting next to those who had fallen during the attack on the caravan. The initial shock gave way to a cold analysis. The clothes, the weapons, and the setting did not belong to the time or place from which he came. The mountainous landscape and distinct atmosphere confirmed his suspicion. He realized that he had fallen into a world of martial arts, the murim. Towering rocky peaks rose under the unknown sky, sealing his fate in that strange and dangerous land. The protagonist watched the fallen man at his feet, feeling the weight of the silence that death had left behind. Suddenly, an overwhelming physical sensation washed over him. The boy closed his eyes, shuddering with a sharp dizziness. The pain seemed to come from within, clouding his vision as he struggled to stay conscious in the face of this sudden discomfort. Catching his breath, he turned his attention to the wreckage of the carriage in the sunlight. Now, he needed to understand how to survive in this new world. The doctor realized that, amidst the massacre, there was a survivor. The wounded man was breathing heavily, struggling to stay conscious before the young man. The boy felt the weight of the situation fall on his shoulders. Panic tried to take over, but he knew he needed to stay rational in this critical moment. The protagonist understood that danger still lurked in the clearing. It was imperative to stay focused and plan an escape route before the bandits returned to finish the job. However, his instincts spoke louder. He couldn't just turn his back and let someone die if there was a chance to help. The survivor, with the little strength he had left, tried to communicate. He muttered disjointed words, desperately seeking the young man's attention. With trembling, bloody hands, the man held out a small cloth bag, insisting with an urgent gesture that the boy take it. The doctor hesitated for a moment, watching the object with confusion. He didn't understand why this man prioritized a material delivery over his own imminent death. Ignoring the offer, the young man acted according to his professional training. He leaned over the patient, determined to stop the bleeding before it was too late. Without adequate equipment available, he quickly improvised. The boy tore the fabric from his clothes with force to create emergency compresses. Examining the exposed injury more closely, the protagonist made a quick assessment. The location of the wound indicated that the man had been unexpectedly lucky. All his concentration turned to the procedure. The doctor's experienced mind took over, calculating the next steps to stabilize the patient. However, the man resisted treatment. In a sudden and surprising movement, he pushed the object against the young man again, interrupting the aid. The bag gave way and its contents spilled onto the dirt floor. Coins and a small child's shoe rolled out, revealing what the man protected so zealously. Among the scattered belongings, something specific caught the doctor's trained eye. A sewing kit now rested within his reach. The boy picked up the needle and thread, realizing the irony of fate. This wasn't just junk. It was the exact tool he needed to save that life. The young doctor focused entirely on the task, preparing the needle with the precision of someone who had performed countless procedures. Without proper equipment or anesthesia, he knew the process would be brutal, but it was the only chance left. With a steady hand, the protagonist pierced the warrior's skin, beginning the emergency suture right there on the ground. The size difference was evident, but the small doctor worked tirelessly on the wounded man's chest. The stitches were rough and improvised, however. They fulfilled the vital function of closing the exposed wound and stopping the blood. Upon finishing the last knot, the young man allowed himself a brief smile of relief. The critical part was over. The survivor, briefly regaining consciousness, whispered his gratitude to the stranger who was fighting to save him. However, the man offered more than just words. With his remaining strength, he handed a small shoe and money to the boy. The child's shoe rested on the ground next to the coins, silently revealing who was waiting for that warrior's return. The protagonist observed those objects, suddenly understanding the emotional weight and tragedy behind that final gesture. It was a last act of desperation and hope, begging for the young man to survive and carry that legacy forward. The grandiose landscape remained indifferent to the human drama, while silence returned to reign in the mountains at dusk. Unfortunately, the wound was fatal. As the boy tried to move the body, the warrior's presence seemed to finally say goodbye to this world. Exhausted by the tremendous physical effort and the tension of the moment, the young doctor collapsed to the ground, completely out of breath. He tried to get up, but his arms were shaking uncontrollably. The fragility of that new child's body was a frustrating obstacle. The young doctor awoke from his trance. The reality of what had just happened hit him with full force. He remained before the body of the warrior he had tried to save. Despite all his effort, death had won that battle. However, observing the surrounding forest, he noticed something crucial. Not everyone was dead. There were still faint breaths among the fallen. A new determination arose in his gaze. He knew that he possessed the knowledge necessary to intervene. The doctor coldly calculated the odds. Without immediate care, those who remained would certainly die in a short time. His fist clenched tightly, trembling. Frustration over his physical weakness and lack of resources consumed him. Putting aside his anger, he knelt beside another wounded person. The priority now was to save whoever could still be saved. The protagonist focused all his attention on the new patient. His eyes scanned the wound, searching for the best way to stop the bleeding. As the sky darkened, the lack of adequate equipment weighed on him. Each improvised procedure was a monumental challenge. The scene of the massacre revealed itself in its entirety. Bodies and wreckage covered the path, a scene of complete desolation. His hands ran over the bodies, searching for vital signs. It was a desperate triage to find anyone who still had a pulse. However, the excessive effort took its toll. The young man coughed violently, feeling his own fragile body protest against the exhaustion. The scene was stained red. The blood loss at the site was massive, making the environment even more oppressive. Upon examining another injured person, the diagnosis was grim. The hemorrhage was too extensive. There was nothing more to be done for that one. The doctor's breathing became irregular and heavy. Sweat ran down his face as he struggled to maintain consciousness and continue his work. The doctor could barely stand, his heavy and irregular breathing revealing that he had reached the absolute limit of his physical endurance. Even exhausted, he continued to examine the fallen. It was necessary to make the cruel distinction between those who could still be saved and those who were beyond hope. The young man stopped abruptly when analyzing the victim's clothing. If this was really the world of martial arts, those uniforms indicated a specific group. He moved with difficulty among the wreckage, dragging bodies and checking vital signs wherever possible. In the end, the scene was bleak. Only 3 figures lay separated from the others, bandaged and stabilized, but still unconscious. The protagonist fell to his knees, confronted by the harsh reality of his limitations. Out of all that carnage, he managed to rescue only 3 lives. Frustration took over his face. The weight of impotence was almost as crushing as the exhaustion that consumed his muscles. His eyes reflected the shock of the moment. The disparity between the number of dead and the few he managed to save was disturbing. Anger and frustration manifested physically. He clenched his fist hard against the ground, lamenting his own weakness. The young man's fragile body began to tremble uncontrollably, a mixture of extreme physical exhaustion and the emotional shock of the carnage around him. However, amidst the trembling, something on the ground diverted his focus. An object lying near the bodies momentarily interrupted his lament. The doctor stretched out his trembling hand and picked up the dirty piece of fabric, examining it curiously as he tried to identify its origin. There was a distinct symbol marked on the cloth, an insignia that revealed the affiliation and purpose of those dead people. He immediately recognized the nature of the group. They were members of a secure escort, professionals hired to transport any cargo as long as the price was right. The young man held the banner firmly, stunned to understand the identity of the victims and the implications of that brutal attack. The young doctor separated the 3 individuals linked to secure delivery. They were the priority in that scene of death and needed immediate care. Without assistance, the protagonist had to drag the bodies alone, exerting a physical strength he barely possessed to move them across the rugged terrain. Improvising tools, he used a sword found in the wreckage to dig and cut, applying survival techniques. The blade struck the wood violently. It was hard and repetitive work to transform the remains of the battle into a safe shelter. He tried to keep his spirits up amidst the effort, remembering with irony that the skills learned in the army finally had practical use. However, physical reality soon weighed in. The effort of carrying logs and building everything alone proved to be an almost unbearable task for the young man. At dusk, the refuge was complete. The improvised structure stood alone under the twilight sky, offering the necessary protection. The doctor leaned against the tent, exhausted but relieved. The construction was finally finished, and he could catch his breath. Inside the shelter, with a fire lit and the wounded properly accommodated, the boy collapsed to the ground, allowing exhaustion to take over. Lying down, he watched the sliver of light on the tent ceiling, enjoying a brief moment of immobility and silence. However, rest brought dark doubts. His eyes reflected a growing and disturbing uncertainty about the fate of those he had just saved. Suddenly, he stood up, clenching his fists tightly. An intrusive and dangerous idea crossed his exhausted mind, suggesting an easier path. The protagonist stared at the three unconscious and vulnerable figures. The silence in the tent became heavy, laden with a moral dilemma. His gaze darkened, hidden by shadows. Extreme fatigue was beginning to erode his judgment, bringing to the surface thoughts he would rather not have. He gritted his teeth, fighting internally against the frustration. The weight of responsibility and exhaustion were about to break his determination. The rescued man rested in a deep sleep, oblivious to the chaos around him and the pain of his injuries. Beside him, the woman also rested, her breathing finally calm after the torment of the escape and the massacre. The protagonist, however, remained sitting on the hard ground, silently watching over those he had just saved. Physical and mental exhaustion overwhelmed him, causing him to stoop under the weight of responsibility and the despair he felt. The night advanced silently, with the full moon witnessing the cold solitude of that desolate place. The makeshift shelter, erected with so much effort, was the only barrier between them and the dangerous vastness of the night forest. Inside the tent, the young doctor couldn't find peace, his body tense as his mind worked feverishly. Observing the sleeping baby in the background, he recalled his own journey. For an orphan like him, each professional achievement had been a badge of honor. He clenched his fist tightly, remembering how he had dedicated his entire life to overcoming countless difficulties and achieving success. The frustration exploded in a silent lament. It seemed like a cruel joke to have ended up trapped in a civil war just because of volunteer work. Suddenly, his internal lamentations were interrupted. Something clicked in his mind, diverting his attention from self-pity. The young man widened his eyes, suddenly noticing details around him that panic and previous exhaustion had hidden. The conclusion was absurd, but undeniable. This wasn't a common war. The evidence indicated that he was in a world of martial arts, the murim. Desperate to deny his own deduction, he pulled at the strange robes he was wearing, seeking some logical explanation that contradicted his thoughts, but reality hit him with full force. The shock paralyzed the doctor as he accepted the impossibility of where he really was. Suddenly, a rumble broke the silence. The young doctor spun into a defensive stance, alarmed by the disturbance that made the ground shake beneath his feet. The sound became unmistakable and terrifying. It was the heavy, rhythmic gallop of dozens of hooves tearing through the earth, signaling a force that was rapidly approaching. Realizing that he was the only barrier between the unconscious survivors and the imminent danger, the protagonist stood firmly in front of the makeshift tent. However, his courage was fragile. The young man's hands trembled uncontrollably as he held the sword, betraying the dread of a healer forced to act as a warrior. As silhouettes and banners appeared on the horizon against the setting sun, his mind considered the worst. He feared that bandits were coming to finish the massacre. However, as the group approached, something on the banners caught his attention. The doctor noticed a familiar detail that contradicted his initial fears. The wind revealed the emblem of the Cloud Dragon Secure Delivery. It wasn't a band of looters, but a professional armed escort passing through the region. The tension dissipated instantly. Overcome with relief, the young man's legs gave way and he fell to his knees, letting out a nervous laugh as he dropped the weapon. He remained on the ground, watching the dust settle as the threat turned into a possible salvation. The adrenaline gave way to pure exhaustion. A single thought cut through his weariness and weak laughter. With the arrival of help, his priority immediately turned to those who needed him, the patients. The caravan was immense, a long line of horses and cargo carriages passing by him. The group followed its path with military discipline. As the carriages passed, the doctor watched in awe. That archaic and grandiose transport was the definitive visual confirmation that he was in a very different reality. Suddenly, the sight before him triggered a specific trigger in his memory. The protagonist's expression changed from admiration to a sudden shock of recognition. His mind was transported to the past. He saw himself in his previous life, holding a study book, being suddenly approached by a superior in a modern environment. The memory was vivid and intense, a moment when he was reprimanded or energetically instructed by a mentor. The past collided with the present in an unexpected way. The young man tried to laugh at the situation, convincing himself that that familiar name was nothing more than an absurd coincidence. His thoughts were interrupted abruptly. One of the mounted scouts spotted him and urgently alerted his superior. The entire caravan ceased movement. Horses and carriages stopped, kicking up dust as the group focused its attention on the doctor. The protagonist felt his blood run cold. The previous denial crumbled before the undeniable reality unfolding before him. A powerful voice announced itself from the heavens. The leader identified himself as Woon Yu Haiyan, the master of Cloud Dragon Secure Delivery. The following question came loaded with authority. The warrior demanded to know the name of the young man who dared to be in his path. The doctor remembered the stories he knew. That man, despite his rough appearance, possessed a reputation for honor that the young man admired. Still, the encounter left him stunned. He could barely formulate a response as he processed the presence of that living legend. The giant descended to the ground and inspected the place. He questioned directly if the boy was responsible for building that tent. The young man readily confirmed, maintaining the respectful posture of a subordinate. He admitted to being the creator of the makeshift shelter. The leader's gaze narrowed. He seemed to be assessing not only the answer, but the little doctor's courage and skill. Heavy footsteps made the ground vibrate as the warrior approached. His physical presence was overwhelming. The doctor felt insignificant before that mountain of muscle. The size difference between them was intimidating. To the boy's surprise, the giant crouched down. The warrior abandoned his superior height to face him on the same level. Woon Yu Hyun watched him closely. The legendary figure was now there, tangible, with an indecipherable expression. The young doctor swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that imposing presence. Anxiety showed on his face as he awaited the warrior's judgment. The caravan leader, with his gigantic stature, leaned over the boy. His posture was intimidating, demanding clear and immediate answers. Pointing to the makeshift structure behind them, the man questioned who had done the work. The protagonist promptly confirmed that he had set up the treatment tent. The confirmation made the warrior narrow his eyes, assessing the young man skeptically. He seemed to doubt that someone so young could be responsible for that. Driven by curiosity and distrust, the leader pulled back the tarp from the entrance. He needed to personally check on the condition of the patients sheltered inside. What his eyes found inside caused an immediate shock. Disbelief gave way to an alarmed understanding of the seriousness of the medical situation. His attitude changed in an instant. The giant spun on his heels and shouted urgent orders to his subordinates, demanding a quick response from the caravan. The protagonist watched the scene, stunned. The sudden burst of activity and the leader's change of tone left him momentarily confused. Amidst the commotion, the door of the main carriage slowly opened. The sound of creaking wood drew the young doctor's attention to the vehicle. He felt a shiver run down his spine. The atmosphere around the carriage seemed to change, announcing the arrival of someone extraordinary. A soft step touched the ground. That simple movement carried the weight of a living legend, one of the renowned 3 celestial doctors. The man emerged, leaning on his cane with dignity. He was the very incarnation of the White Dragon, a name revered by everyone in the world of medicine. His presence was overwhelming, making even the wind seem to respect him. The guards and travelers watched with reverence as the figure rose above them. Despite his age or physical frailty, he exuded an ethereal beauty. His fine features and elegant posture contrasted sharply with the dirt of the battlefield. The young doctor stood paralyzed, his eyes fixed on the legend before him. The shock of finding such an icon in that remote place left him completely speechless. The protagonist froze upon recognizing that face. The image matched perfectly with the description from the story he knew. The shock was immediate. He realized that he was facing a crucial character from the novel he had read in his previous life. The memory of the original book flooded his mind, confirming the identity of that being and the danger he represented. It was the supreme demon. The legendary figure emanated an aura that dominated the entire surrounding environment. His appearance was ethereal, but the doctor knew the real danger that lurked behind those elegant features. The young man recalled the original plot, where that invincible warrior ended up wounded and on the verge of death. In that narrative, the demon's encounter with a child in the midst of war had been a crucial turning point. The doctor watched the scene overlap with reality, aware of the weight that character carried in the plot. The white-haired man made a thoughtful sound, intrigued by what he felt in his own body after waking up. He analyzed the scar on his chest. The suture technique used there was something strange and precise, unlike anything he knew. His eyes revealed surprise. The quality of the medical treatment exceeded any expectations for that era. A silent understanding took hold of him. The warrior realized that the healer responsible for this possessed exceptional skills. He moved his hand, preparing to test his body's response after the emergency surgery. With his hands positioned over the wound, he began to channel his internal energy to probe the depth of the healing. The power flowed without obstruction, and a light enveloped the area, confirming to the warrior the absolute success of the doctor's procedure. The wounded warrior remained still, allowing the mysterious white-haired figure to approach and inspect his condition. With a clinical and penetrating gaze, the figure examined the details of the procedure, assessing the quality of the work performed. A finger pointed directly at the scar on his abdomen, tracing the suture line to verify the precision of the stitches. The veteran recoiled slightly, surprised by the thorough analysis and the sudden proximity of that inspection. Turning to the young doctor, the white-haired figure directed his attention to him, leaving the boy visibly nervous about the judgment. An approving smile appeared on his face as he noted that the suture technique was, in fact, impressive. Around them, the observers' tension dissipated, turning into relief and gratitude as they realized the treatment had saved those lives. While the group leader questioned the boy's identity, the young man received recognition for his extraordinary skill. The mysterious figure ended the assessment with a genuine smile, pleased with the talent he had just witnessed. Shortly after, the protagonist watched in silence as the group prepared to leave, kicking up dust as they departed. He bowed respectfully on the ground, maintaining a humble posture as the caravan and horses passed by him. Before the final departure, the warrior made a point of showing his gratitude, solemnly vowing to repay that life debt in the future. The carriages continued on their way under the light of dusk, leaving the young man behind with the promise made. Later, the sound of a boiling kettle filled the silence, marking the return to the calm of everyday life. The young doctor, now far from immediate danger, prepared to resume his routine inside the refuge. The doctor brought a steaming kettle, questioning the need for that presence there. To him, the extra effort seemed unnecessary. Lying in bed, the white-haired patient remained at rest, still recovering from the previous confrontation. The wounded figure, however, justified his actions, claiming that this was a moment of extreme need that required intervention. The young man wrung the soaked cloth tightly, reflecting on the weight and consequences of having saved that specific life. As he placed the damp compress on the patient's forehead, the doctor confirmed the identity of Leader Woon and commented on the deaths that had occurred. The memory of the abrupt departure and the sound of the caravan wheels still seemed to resonate in the silent environment. The doctor agreed with the patient's logic about debts of gratitude and the responsibilities resulting from that encounter. He stared at the figure in the bed, incredulous at the carefree attitude displayed in the face of such serious injuries. The young man let out a deep and sonorous sigh, exhausted by his patient's stubbornness and the accumulated tension of the day. Even with his eyes covered by the cloth, the patient smiled, recalling old times with a disconcerting calm. The doctor reached out in an abrupt gesture, deciding to remove the compress to check on the other's condition. The patient revealed a penetrating gaze from under the fabric, demonstrating that his mind was sharp despite his wounded body. With a distant look, the figure lying down admitted to fully understanding the gravity of the current situation. The tension dissipated into a moment of humor. The patient seemed satisfied, leaving the doctor visibly irritated and sulky with that frivolous attitude. However, upon remembering the stitched scar on his chest, the patient stated with absolute seriousness that protecting the child was worth all the suffering. The orange-haired warrior looked exhausted, his expression burdened with a silent resignation to what he was hearing. He closed his eyes and sighed, realizing that there was nothing more to be said at that moment of tension. The memory of that conversation echoed distantly, reminding him that it was impossible to win certain arguments while the landscape loomed around. However, reality began to shift. An unmistakable aroma of medicinal herbs invaded his senses, pulling his consciousness back. The scent awakened a deep sensory memory. The young man with black hair opened his eyes slowly, still dazed. He tried to move, but his body reacted with a spasm. A groan of discomfort escaped his lips as he awoke in the unfamiliar bed. The air seemed to be lacking in his lungs. He gasped for breath, feeling his chest burn from the sudden effort. Panting, he felt a growing anxiety, bothered by the intense feeling of being watched while he slept. Sweat ran down his face as he tried to focus his vision, his mind still clouded and panicked by the abrupt awakening. Sunlight filtered through the ornate wooden windows, revealing a peaceful and traditional setting. He stared at the ceiling beams, wondering internally where his companions might be and how he had ended up there. The room was calm, with tidy beds and bathed in a warm light that contrasted with his mental confusion. Suddenly, his instincts flared. His pupil contracted as he realized he was not alone in the room. Someone was standing there, motionless beside his bed. The presence suggested that the figure had been watching him for some time. The young man turned his face quickly, surprised to find the person who was patiently awaiting his awakening. Upon opening his eyes, the young doctor found himself surrounded. A whole entourage stood around his bedside, watching him attentively. The central figure, a woman with silver hair, offered him a serene smile. There was an aura of natural leadership about her that dominated the room. Beside her, her companions reacted in distinct ways. The red-haired man seemed amused by the situation, while the older woman maintained a stern and watchful expression. Other guards and servants also waited silently. The tension on the bandana-wearing man's face suggested that the group's security was still a constant priority. The protagonist rose suddenly, surprised. The realization of having such a large audience watching him wake up put him on alert. He still felt the weight of exhaustion in his small body. The mental confusion of waking up mixed with the strangeness of the situation. His eyes, however, were magnetically drawn back to the woman in white. She seemed to be about to say something important. The boy was stunned, trying to process the hierarchy of this group. Her posture indicated a noble origin that clashed with the rustic environment. She spoke to him using formal honorifics, praising his education. The woman acknowledged that, without his quick response and first aid, the group would have faced death. The young man lowered his gaze, feeling embarrassed. He downplayed the feat, insisting that he only treated someone who desperately needed to be saved. As he watched her closely, he was impressed. Her beauty and elegance were so unreal that she seemed like a celebrity or a higher being. The conversation, however, became more serious. She began to explain about significant side effects, while the red-haired warrior behind her confirmed silently. The doctor listened with increased attention. The information she shared was crucial to understanding what was happening to his own body or to the patient's. It was revealed that she was the daughter of a noble tribe. To train herself, she had decided to work in the dangerous Cloud Dragon escort service. The revelation explained her hidden strength. Behind that delicate and melancholic look resided the determination of a warrior in training. The young doctor rested deeply, finally succumbing to exhaustion after the grueling events. The silence of the room offered a brief refuge for his mind. Upon waking, however, his thoughts turned to the knowledge he possessed about this world. He recalled that this specific clan should only appear much later in the original story. The connection became clear in his mind. The patient he had treated was no ordinary person, but rather the daughter of one of the leaders of that influential tribe. The reality of the situation hit him physically. He squeezed the fabric of the sheets tightly, feeling the tension rise as he realized what he had gotten himself into. A wave of shock ran through his body. The gravity of his involvement with such important figures left him momentarily stunned. Before he could process everything, he was surprised by a sudden hug. Someone threw themselves at him with a disconcerting familiarity. The orange-haired man held him tightly, showing immense and palpable relief at seeing him awake and safe. The visitor stepped back just enough to face him, seeking to confirm if this was really the benefactor they were looking for. Before the expectant gazes of the entourage, the young doctor remained humble. He explained that he had only done what was within his reach to help in the critical situation. A genuine smile appeared on his face as he spoke to the group. Knowing that his medical skills were useful and saved a life brought him great satisfaction. The young man's modest words deeply touched the servants present. Emotion overflowed, and they could barely contain tears of gratitude and relief. The eye-patched warrior, with a stern expression, stepped forward to formalize the thanks. He made it clear that the noble tribe now had a debt of honor to the doctor. As a first concrete demonstration of this gratitude, they offered him a valuable gift. A box containing a rare internal medicine was extended towards him. The young man received the object, visibly surprised. He knew that this item possessed inestimable value and represented extraordinary recognition. The acceptance of the gift triggered a new wave of exaggerated reactions from the servants, who expressed their devotion and gratitude in a noisy manner. Before the young man's eyes, a legendary centennial pine medicinal sphere was revealed. This treasure was created from the sap of pine roots cultivated in sacred places, containing the life force accumulated over a century. The protagonist was paralyzed, unable to believe that an item of inestimable value was being offered to him. The white-haired woman watched him silently, assessing his reaction to the gift. She handed over the box personally, a gesture that went beyond gratitude for saving the heir. It was a sign of deep respect. Her gaze softened, conveying a benevolence that contrasted with her aura of power. Considering the high position she held in the noble tribe, this humble attitude of approaching him was something extraordinary. The golden sphere rested in the box, emanating an energy that promised miracles. The boy lowered his head, feeling suddenly tense and unworthy of such honor. He closed his eyes tightly, while the cold sweat betrayed the physical and mental exhaustion he was trying to hide. The noblewoman explained that the remedy was ideal for treating internal injuries and headaches plaguing his exhausted body. The young man stared at the object in his hands, understanding that his recovery depended on it. Hesitation gave way to necessity. He knew he couldn't continue in that weakened state. With his decision made, he announced that he would accept the gift and use it immediately. He held the pill firmly, ready to ingest the medicine and absorb its vital energy. Without hesitation, the doctor tossed the precious medicinal sphere into his mouth. With visible effort, he swallowed the legendary remedy in one gulp. The young man lowered his head, feeling the weight of the gift and the immediate effect on his body. Immediately, a bottle was offered to help wash down the dry pill. He looked up, surprised by the constant attention he was receiving from this group. The white-haired woman and her companions watched him, ensuring he accepted the treatment. Realizing the doctor's exhaustion, the orange-haired man decided it was time to let him rest. He carefully settled the young man into bed, covering him to ensure his comfort. The group then quietly withdrew from the room, leaving him in peace. Calmness reigned over the residents as time passed outside. However, the two leaders remained in the enclosure, watching over the patient's sleep. The doctor, exhausted by recent events and the effect of the remedy, fell into a deep sleep. The white-haired woman seemed worried, exchanging hushed words with her companion about the doctor's condition. She approached the bedside, determined to personally intervene in his recovery. With dexterity, she prepared a needle, ready to apply her own medical knowledge. The orange-haired warrior questioned his companion's generosity. To him, it seemed wasteful to offer such valuable treatment to a stranger. The woman ignored the objection and focused her energy. The needle in her fingers glowed intensely, charged with precise spiritual power. With a swift movement, she inserted the needle. A stream of luminous energy immediately flowed into the doctor's body, initiating the internal process. As the warrior watched tensely and sweating, the woman maintained a confident smile. She knew exactly what she was doing and the risks involved. The young man's body reacted physically to the invasion of energy. Even in deep sleep, the sweat on his face betrayed the intensity of the internal transformation. Hours later, his consciousness began to return. Upon opening his eyes, he immediately recognized the same wooden ceiling he had seen before passing out. The doctor suddenly awoke, sitting up in bed with a racing heart. He was stunned, trying to situate himself in time and space. He blinked repeatedly, feeling something different. His senses seemed sharper, and a strange vibration ran through his body. Looking down, confusion took over his mind. He needed to check his own body to understand that new sensation. An indescribable vitality emanated from his limbs. It was as if every muscle and bone had been renewed during sleep. However, the epiphany about his new power was interrupted by a much more urgent and embarrassing realization. The young man panicked when he realized he was completely naked. He cowered on the floor, trying to cover his exposed dignity. The shock was absolute. The shame outweighed any questions about his new physical abilities at that moment. His cry of confusion and embarrassment echoed out of the cabin, breaking the tranquility of the place. His hosts entered the room with complete naturalness. The woman calmly explained that while he was sleeping, she had performed a painful bone restructuring to prepare him for the future. The doctor woke up stunned by the revelation. The woman casually explained that he had undergone a legendary bone restructuring procedure, something he thought was impossible. She smiled with a disconcerting tranquility. To her, that medical miracle seemed to be just another ordinary day, which left the young man even more perplexed. The shock showed on the protagonist's face. He could hardly believe that his body had been subjected to such an advanced purification technique while he slept. Suddenly, he felt something strange on his back. Touching it, he noticed a sticky, dark substance, realizing that it was the impurities and toxins expelled from his blood vessels. The woman approached, invading his personal space without ceremony. The doctor, vulnerable and exposed, felt a shiver of nervousness at her sudden proximity. She ignored his discomfort, focused on something that had caught her attention. The young man remained still, unsure how to react to this invasion of privacy. With a clinical eye, she examined the results of the procedure. Her expression changed from amused to analytical as she observed the details on his skin. Deciding to abandon social niceties, she announced that she would speak informally from then on. Shrinking and with no room to negotiate, the doctor readily agreed. Her hand touched his back, checking the texture of the residue. The contact was firm, seeking to confirm a suspicion about the patient's physical condition. She commented on the presence of a murky qi, something unexpected after the purification. The protagonist stared at her, confused by this sudden and strange diagnosis. Intrigued, she leaned in even closer to investigate the anomaly. She seemed determined to understand the origin of that impure energy that persisted in his body. For the doctor, the situation was surreal. He realized that he was experiencing a classic cliché from martial arts stories, a high-level process happening in his own flesh. The environment around him seemed silent, contrasting with the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. The reality of that fantastic world was imposing itself on the logic he knew. He lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. The mix of shame for his nudity and confusion about his new powers left him paralyzed. Suddenly, the tension dissipated. The woman raised her face with a jovial and playful smile, catching his attention in a relaxed and unexpected way. The doctor stood before the elder, feeling slightly embarrassed by the previous situation. He tried to maintain his composure in front of the authority figure. In a gesture of deep reverence and gratitude, the young man bowed over the bed. He recognized the help he had received and the position of the leader before him. The doctor then took the child into his arms, reaffirming his duty to protect him. The white dragon watched the paternal interaction with an attentive and serene gaze. The boy, however, seemed stunned by such dedication. His gaze conveyed a silent doubt about why someone would risk so much for him. The elder offered a warm and knowing smile. There was a tacit approval in his expression, as if he were blessing that newly formed bond. The next sensation was one of lightness, as if the body were floating in the void. The reality of the moment dissolved into a sensory immersion. Beneath the surface, consciousness slowly returned. The blurred vision began to focus, perceiving the liquid environment around him. The child emerged from the water, taking a deep breath of the humid and warm air. The bath represented an immediate physical relief after the recent traumas. The place turned out to be the organization's great hot springs, an unexpected luxury. The boy observed the grandeur of the base, impressed by the power of that group. Alone in the immense bathtub, the boy felt small in the face of so much opulence. That comfort was a stark contrast to the life he had led until then. The doctor soon joined him in the bath, bringing an atmosphere of camaraderie. The moment of relaxation was necessary for both after the tension of the trip. Suddenly, the boy reacted with astonishment, bringing his hand to his head. Something in the situation, or a sudden memory, caused him an immediate shock. The memory of simple meals and everyday life came to the surface. The contrast between the humble life they led and the current luxury was evident. Back in the present, the boy cast a skeptical and distrustful look at his guardian. The doctor, in turn, seemed to be trying to justify himself or calm the boy's spirits. Ignoring the boy's bad mood, the doctor began to scrub his back. As he received the care, the boy grumbled about his injuries, accepting the help begrudgingly. The doctor tried to maintain a friendly expression, but the boy stared at him distrustfully. The tension between the caregiver and the reluctant patient was still palpable. Ignoring the silent resistance, the man continued to wash the child's hair. It was a simple gesture of care, necessary after everything they had been through. The steam from the hot springs filled the vast stone enclosure. As the boy moved away, the doctor reflected on the resilience of that little survivor. The boy's obstinacy was impressive. The doctor pondered how a child who had come from nowhere had received such a complex procedure from the legendary divine doctor. The boy continued to swim away, isolating himself in the warmth of the water. He seemed to be seeking a moment of peace, away from any forced interaction. The elevated temperature began to take effect. The child's face relaxed, and his eyes lost focus, momentarily surrendering to exhaustion. He submerged his face, letting the water muffle the outside world. The submerged silence offered a brief refuge from reality. Seeing the small body floating in the center of the bath, the doctor realized the irony of fate. The act of saving that life was, curiously, what guaranteed his own survival. Memories of a not-so-distant past came to the surface. He recalled the days of hard work alongside smiling colleagues, a time when medicine was about healing, not war. The world seemed to have turned upside down. As his thoughts wandered, the tranquility of the water contrasted with the chaos that had turned his life upside down. It had been a miserable existence, he concluded, as he looked at the misty horizon. A whole life dedicated only to duty. The bitterness of that realization weighed on him. The doctor realized that he had always worked tirelessly for others and for other people's families, forgetting about himself. Now, however, the scenario had changed. He wondered what the next step would be, now that he had completed that crucial task. Yuho's words echoed in his mind, bringing brutal images. He recalled the massacre and the bodies left behind in the rain and mud. The fate of those who died was sealed. According to what he was told, the caravan and the victims had a clear objective. They were all on their way to Seoju. The young doctor froze as he connected the dots. That specific situation had been mentioned repeatedly in the book he knew. The original narrative dictated that the protagonist, the future Demon King, would unite with the dark forces and overcome brutal trials to rise to power. The magnitude of that revelation weighed on him, causing him to delve deeply into his own memories and fears. He understood with painful clarity that in that vast world he was nothing more than an extra, a mere disposable extra in someone else's story. The shock of this realization hit him violently, awakening him to the imminent danger of his new reality. In his past life, he had dedicated every moment to saving patients, racing against time in hospital corridors to preserve lives. But in the murim, where human existence was fragile and disposable like that of insects, medicine alone would not be enough. He concluded that he needed to cultivate martial strength. Floating in those waters, the young man accepted the weight of his destiny. Silent determination began to replace the fear in his gaze. He walked across the damp floor of the baths, leaving behind the uncertainties as he physically moved toward his future. The boy emerged from the hot waters, breaking the surface with a decisive and renewed movement. He reached his hand up, feeling the drops run down as if he were being reborn into this new life. As he caught his breath, his mind worked quickly, tracing the steps needed to survive in that hostile environment. The doctor knew he needed to become powerful, not out of selfish ambition, but out of pure necessity for survival. Only with real power would he earn the right to protect anyone else in that merciless world. However, upon glimpsing his reflection in the mirror, he stopped short. Something in the image before him caused an immediate and disconcerting surprise. The young man stared at his own reflection, aware of his current limitations. Although he lacked wealth and brute strength, he possessed the invaluable knowledge of what the future held. That advantage brought a confident smile to his face. He knew that, in addition to precognition, his medical skills would be the key to surviving in that world. Outside, however, someone was already waiting for him. The rigid posture and crossed arms indicated that this man was not there for a casual conversation. The superior maintained an unreadable expression, patiently waiting for the boy to come out, as if testing his reaction time. The protagonist approached with calculated humility. He adopted the posture of an obedient servant, hiding his true intentions behind a harmless smile. He promptly reported that the assigned task had been completed and the tea was served, maintaining a respectful tone so as not to arouse suspicion. However, the lack of an immediate response made him hesitate. The young man realized that he was being silently assessed at that very moment. Without saying much, the man turned and began to walk. The boy understood the implicit command and followed his steps through the courtyard. Even leading the way, the superior's vigilance was constant. He cast a furtive glance back, monitoring every movement of his companion. They crossed the grounds under the watchful eyes of other servants, who seemed surprised and cautious to see the two together. The braided man narrowed his eyes, deeply analyzing the boy. His intuition told him that this fragile appearance was just a well-constructed facade. A perceptive smile appeared on his lips. He seemed to have noticed something that escaped the eyes of others, unraveling part of the disguise. The protagonist felt the weight of that scrutiny. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy, and he realized that his acting was being put to the test. Cold sweat began to run down his face. He forced a smile to maintain his composure, aware that any slip could be fatal under that penetrating gaze. The silent tension between master and supposed servant dissipated into the vastness of the complex, where secrets were kept under the ancient roofs. The young man sat at the table, waiting under the watchful eye of the couple who received him. The atmosphere seemed formal, but there was a silent tension in the air as he remained still before the observers. The hosts served tea and food, politely insisting that he enjoy the refreshments while he waited. Despite the apparent hospitality, the protagonist felt pressured and watched in that huge chair. As the man served the hot drink, the young man kept his head down, feeling the cold sweat of anxiety. The excessive proximity of the servants and the constant scrutiny increased his discomfort. However, he decided to act. His hand reached toward the bowl, reaching for the golden cookies that had been strategically placed before him. At that instant, the protagonist's expression changed drastically. The nervousness disappeared, giving way to a dark and calculating look, focused on a deep internal analysis. He quickly combined the knowledge he had about the plot of that world with his experience in modern medicine. A treatment strategy began to form in his mind. Upon holding the food, the truth was revealed. He immediately identified that those were cookies containing a chi-dispersing poison, a cunning trap. Even aware of the toxicity and the imminent threat of death that haunted the place, the young man brought the cookie to his mouth. He began to chew quietly, ignoring the lethal danger. The sound of his swallowing marked the decisive moment. He swallowed the poison without showing any hesitation or immediate adverse effect, accepting the risk. To the absolute astonishment of anyone who knew the nature of the sweet, he didn't stop. The protagonist continued to eat, devouring the second cookie naturally. Satisfied, he wiped the corner of his mouth with a confident and malicious smile. The deadly substance seemed to have been received with pleasure, defying the logic of the situation. Suddenly, a noise at the entrance broke the silence. The door moved, indicating that someone was entering the premises at that very moment. The servant couple reacted with absolute shock. Sweat ran down their faces as they stared at the scene, visibly terrified and surprised by the unfolding events. The young man, still with the sweet in his mouth, turned his face with an intense and somber look. He seemed unperturbed, coldly observing the reaction of others. The white dragon and his guards appeared in the room. The imposing arrival of the group, led by the white-haired figure, captured everyone's attention and paralyzed the servants. Cold sweat ran down the protagonist's face under the bamboo hat. The tension of the moment was almost unbearable, but he knew he needed to maintain the disguise at all costs. He entered the room with measured steps, aware of the weight of the identity he had assumed. It was a figure seen as a disappointment by the elders, an heiress without talent for the sword. Before the young master, the protagonist bowed deeply as a sign of respect. He expressed his sincere gratitude to the savior, playing the role of the humble relative perfectly. With his face partially hidden, he made a solemn promise to repay that debt. As he spoke, the tarnished reputation of that identity, the black sheep of the family, weighed on every word. The room was full of powerful figures who watched his every move. The plot was dense. The youngest cousin should have died there, an event destined to incite the supposed older sister. The protagonist kept his head down and his eyes closed, trembling slightly. He knew that any slip-up in that performance could be fatal in front of such perceptive warriors. The young cousin, oblivious to the dark machinations and imminent danger, reacted with a genuine and innocent smile. The presence of the supposed relative seemed to bring her unexpected relief. The boy at the table, however, seemed completely disconcerted. The interaction took a turn he clearly didn't expect, leaving him visibly nervous and awkward. The protagonist widened his eyes, caught by surprise. Something in the reaction of those present, or in the unfolding of the conversation, completely escaped the script he had imagined. Feeling the weight of the critical gazes, he bowed again in desperation. The leaders in the background watched the scene in silence, analyzing the veracity of that submission. He remained huddled in his position, trying to look harmless. The silence in the room became oppressive, and he felt tiny under the attention of those legendary figures. Suddenly, he recoiled with a brusque movement, startled. The charged atmosphere made his survival instincts scream to flee from there. The white-haired man watched the scene with an enigmatic and dangerous smile. That penetrating look suggested that he found the situation more amusing than threatening. The young master, on the other hand, watched with absolute seriousness. His eyes analyzed the family dynamic unfolding before him, searching for any inconsistency. The disparity between the two was cruel and evident. On one side, the failed heiress with no martial talent. On the other, the brilliant cousin who mastered the secret techniques. The protagonist was now trapped in the center of this rivalry. The original narrative described a past of affection and complicity between the sisters of the family. However, according to the novel, this story culminated in a scene of horror under a torrential rain. The destiny reserved for that lineage was marked by tears and deep suffering. The young man knew the hidden truth. It had all been an elder's plan to force the heiress to commit an irreversible massacre and take over the clan. Upon recalling these crucial details of the plot, a calculating smile appeared on the protagonist's face. He held the knowledge. With the strategy defined, he steadied his pace, preparing to interact with the figures in front of him. Analyzing the group, he estimated at what exact point in the novel's chronology this encounter was happening. His eyes fell on the silver-haired woman, recognizing in her the central figure of that imminent tragedy. He also noticed the tension in the orange-haired guard, who maintained a vigilant posture. Suddenly, the doctor broke the tension of the environment, doubling over in a violent and exaggerated coughing fit. The guard promptly supported him, assuming that the poor man had not yet recovered from his previous injuries. The silver-haired woman watched the scene carefully, showing a silent interest in the fragility of others. The protagonist raised his face, displaying red and teary eyes, perfectly selling the image of a helpless and terrified victim. While the guard checked his condition, the doctor maintained the disguise, ensuring that his supposed weakness was the only thing visible to them. The protagonist asked for permission to examine the young patient's pulse. The guard readily agreed, allowing the supposed doctor to proceed with the assessment. With a fluid and professional movement, he extended his hand. It was time to check the boy's internal condition through direct contact. Upon feeling the pulse, the doctor immediately noticed an anomaly. The energy circulation there revealed something that was not right. He concentrated deeply, ignoring the surrounding environment. Reading the internal flow required total focus to understand the extent of the problem. The silver-haired woman watched his every gesture with intensity. She seemed to analyze whether his technique was genuine or just a farce. The examination ended as quickly as it began. The protagonist released the patient's wrist, having already formulated his complete diagnosis. Without hesitation, he revealed that the boy's internal chi had dispersed. The accuracy of that analysis caught those present completely by surprise. The older man reacted with immediate and visible shock. That diagnosis touched on a sensitive point that he didn't expect to see exposed. The boy tensed upon hearing his condition revealed so openly. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy with the news. The doctor then explained that he had injected a small amount of his own chi during the previous procedure. He justified how this aided in bone restructuring. As the conversation continued, he outlined the possibilities for help. The protagonist suggested that there were ways to treat that specific condition. The group leader, however, questioned the claim with skepticism. He seemed to seek understanding of that stranger's true capabilities and intentions. The silver-haired woman lowered her gaze, showing sadness. The doctor's words seemed to confirm old fears about the young man's health. The group remained silent, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The doctor's revelation forced them to reconsider his importance there. Noticing the tension in the air, the boy tried to lighten the mood with a nervous smile. He seemed embarrassed to be the focus of so much concern. The silver-haired young woman found humor in the situation, her light laughter momentarily breaking the tension in the room. On the table, the tea and cookies awaited untouched, served as a gesture of traditional hospitality. However, the atmosphere changed abruptly. As the young woman coldly averted her gaze, the guards around felt a sudden weight in the air. The veteran reacted with indignation, protesting the disrespectful way the situation was being handled in front of their savior. The heiress, however, maintained her sharp expression. Her icy gaze indicated that she had noticed something that the others still ignored. The orange-haired guard narrowed his eyes, his warrior instincts alerting him to a hidden danger nearby. The servants responsible for the service began to sweat profusely, the terror plastered on their faces betraying their guilt. The veteran stopped short, comprehension finally hitting him. Shock replaced his anger as he understood the gravity of the moment. With absolute authority, the young woman ordered that the food served be disposed of immediately, confirming the deadly suspicion. The warrior's expression hardened. The betrayal within the camp had been exposed, and the threat was real. They deduced that this was not an isolated act, but part of a larger conspiracy involving poisoning and a possible invasion. The giant leader marched furiously out of the enclosure, followed by his lieutenants, determined to find the source of the betrayal. In the lower courtyard, the manager in charge was located and confronted, isolated in the center of the structure. The man remained with his back turned, motionless before the entrance, awaiting the inevitable confrontation with his superiors. Suddenly, the silver-haired young woman was caught off guard, her attention diverted by an unexpected interruption right next to her. The protagonist delved into his memories, reflecting on the cruel nature of medical learning. He recalled how, in his past life, medicine demanded sacrifices. Without hesitation, he had used his own colleagues as human guinea pigs just to improve his vein-finding technique. A malicious smile appeared on his face as he realized that his lack of scruples remained intact. He was ready to use any advantage necessary. The tension in the room dissipated momentarily. While the servants remained kneeling, the main group discussed the next steps in that interaction. The silver-haired woman, however, maintained an indecipherable expression. Her sharp gaze seemed to dissect the intentions of the boy in front of her. Realizing that he was being assessed, the young man quickly lowered his head. He resumed his submissive posture so as not to arouse more suspicion. The leader casually mentioned the delivery services and the ongoing investigation. The boy feigned nervousness and confusion in the face of that adult conversation. She then leaned in his direction, shortening the distance. The young man recoiled slightly, maintaining his role as a frightened child. With a knowing smile, she whispered something that only he could hear. The implicit proposal carried a weight that would change the dynamic between them. The protagonist froze for an instant. Her words activated something in his mind, transforming the simulated fear into pure calculation. Internally, his eyes gleamed with revelation. He realized that this situation was not a threat, but rather a perfect opportunity to extort money. Greed took over his thoughts. The mask of innocence hid a voracious mind, focused only on the profit he could get from these rich people. Regaining his composure, he turned to the group with exaggerated humility. It was time to consolidate his position as a harmless victim. He then recited a moving speech about having no memories or family. The young man deliberately debased himself, offering his help as if he were a pathetic being in search of purpose. The performance was impeccable. Both the servants and the orange-haired guard looked at him with deep sympathy, completely deceived by the emotional manipulation. The silver-haired woman and the escort leader exchanged tense glances. The gravity of the moment seemed to weigh on the old master's shoulders, who perceived the delicacy of the situation. The elder, however, decided to comfort the boy. Placing his hand gently on the young man's head, he offered words of reassurance, assuming a paternal and protective stance. Before his subordinates, the leader proclaimed the boy as the group's savior. He solemnly promised that such a heroic deed would not go without due reward and recognition. To everyone's surprise, the protagonist immediately rejected the offer. The dry and direct refusal left the red-haired guard visibly confused, unable to understand the supposed amnesiac youth's logic. Shock took over the old master's face. The young man, ignoring all etiquette or hierarchy, grabbed the leader's robes with an unexpected and desperate firmness. The older man was left speechless by this sudden audacity. He tried to process the reason for this abrupt interruption, while the woman watched the unusual scene. She couldn't help but smile amusedly as she noticed the boy's determination. The protagonist remained clinging to the master, insisting on his refusal with an almost comical fervor. Confusion hung in the air, echoing beyond the walls of the room. No one there could quite understand what the young man was refusing with such vehemence and stubbornness. In the stillness of the night, a movement broke the silence. Something slithered through the halls of the grand residence, moving between the shadows, unseen. Suddenly, two figures dressed in black appeared in the garden. They landed on the grass without making the slightest noise. The assassins surveyed the area, calculating their next move. But it wasn't just two. An entire squad mobilized through the courtyard. They moved so fast they were barely a blur in the darkness. In seconds, they took control of the rooftops, watching from above, and they jumped into action. One of them landed in the center while his companions invaded the place. The residence was completely surrounded. There was no escape. The group's leader stopped, and a dark, demonic presence appeared behind him. The assassin fixed his gaze on the main building, his target, and with a single word, he gave the order to attack. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed over the village. It was a frequency that only masters of internal chi could hear, a signal. In the shadows, a group of assassins heard the call. Immediately, they set off. They moved like ghosts, leaping with incredible speed. A guard saw them on the rooftops and froze. With all his might, the man screamed to raise the alarm. But an assassin was already upon him. Chaos erupted all over the place. Screams filled the night. The guards came running out with torches, completely disoriented. They ran in panic, not knowing where the attack was coming from. From above, an assassin was surprised to see the mess and wondered what the hell was going on. But there was no time to hesitate. He drew his sword, ready for battle. Out of nowhere, a mysterious man appeared and blocked his attack with a shining sword. The old man's gaze was one of pure power. He wasn't just a guard. A masked assassin appeared out of nowhere, his sword ready to strike. An old man confronted him, furious, holding what looked like a bottle. The old master stared at him, demanding to know who he was. High on a roof, under a red sky, the two warriors met. The assassin blocked a surprise blow, the enemy blade grazing his face. The old man was surprised. He didn't expect the intruder to be so fast. Suddenly, the assassin stomped hard, shattering the roof tiles. The old master could barely react to the unexpected movement. Angry, he shouted that it was a cheap trick and unleashed his true power. An incredible energy began to emanate from his hand. He unleashed the Yellow Emperor sword technique, a devastating attack. But the assassin dodged with impressive agility amidst the chaos. The master stood on the destroyed roof, surrounded by smoke and power. The masked man responded with a full-speed kick, and then the assassin released his own aura, preparing to counterattack. A masked assassin dove from the sky, his sword aimed straight to kill. The older man saw him coming at the last instant, his eyes wide with surprise. But his body faded into dust, narrowly dodging the fatal blow. The old man reappeared and blocked the sword. The clash of steel echoed loudly. The assassin didn't flinch, gripping his weapon with a cold, determined look. Both warriors clashed again, creating an explosion of light with their power. The force of the impact kicked up a cloud of dust. The master regained his composure, ready for the next assault. The assassin was already upon him. Without hesitation, the older man launched a counterattack with his own weapon. But the assassin was faster and landed a brutal blow on his shoulder. The master screamed, a mix of pain and rage from the impact he received. The assassin prepared for the final blow. His sword began to glow with a blue aura. Suddenly, that energy turned red, emanating a dark and threatening power. The old man watched in horror as his enemy lunged, enveloped in a bloody wake. Their swords clashed in a final flash, the decisive moment of the battle. Under a sky stained red, two warriors prepared for their final showdown. The ninja unleashed his technique, vampiric phantom fencing, a flurry of blood and steel. But the master responded with the Yellow Emperor sword technique, a perfect defense. The two skills collided in an explosion of light that shook the battlefield. The elder master withstood the impact, his face full of determination. His opponent, consumed by fury, lunged through the explosion to attack. His movements were blurs, a whirlwind of attacks and parries at incredible speed. The blue-robed master saw a perfect opening in the midst of the chaos. The ninja realized his fatal mistake, his eyes widening in surprise. Desperate, the masked assassin swung his sword with all his might. He created a gale of cutting energy to try and overwhelm his enemy, but the ninja could only watch in horror as his attack was deflected. The master was faster. A flash of his sword marked his face. In an instant, their hands met, fighting for control of the weapon. It was then that the master unleashed his ultimate technique, the Sleeping Dragon Ascension. The hooded assassin couldn't believe it. He muttered that he didn't know such a sword style existed. On the rooftop, the victor stood over his fallen enemy. The battle was over. Someone landed hard, breaking the tiles. From the shadows, a young man watched intently. He whispered that it had already begun. Outside, a pitched battle was raging. A lone warrior faced a group of assassins. Steel clashed furiously in the night. Bodies fell one after another. The observer didn't miss a single detail. His eyes were fixed on the chaos. He contemplated the massacre with a chilling calm. After seeing enough, The young man turned away from the window. He walked through the infirmary and noticed that a certain boy still hadn't woken up. Standing by the bed, he thought about the hard life that awaited that child. The boy in the bed was none other than our protagonist. But he wasn't asleep. He found it fascinating that so many people had come to kill him. His expression was cold and full of determination. Meanwhile, a leader trusted his men. He knew they would have won anyway. He recalled a violent past where much more blood could have been spilled. A clan of warriors rose under his banners, ready for battle. The war was a chaos of swords and screams amidst the massacre. But it was all a memory in the mind of a sharp-eyed young man. The boy watched his companion, surprised that he was sleeping so soundly with all the noise. Suddenly, the young man was startled by an abrupt movement. The man in the bed woke up screaming, drowning in a bloody nightmare. He was reliving the horrors of a previous battle, trapped in panic. The sound of his screams was terrifying, as if he were truly suffering. The boy listened attentively, his eyes wide with concern. With a bead of sweat, the young man realized the gravity of the situation. The boy looked down, with an expression of deep unease on his face. Quickly, he started searching urgently for something inside a drawer. And then, a mischievous and somewhat sinister smile appeared on his face. Calmly, the boy lit a red candle, preparing something mysterious. In a dark room, 3 red candles burned slowly, filling the air with smoke. A young man watched the scene, with an expression of deep concern on his face. Suddenly, a scream of heart-wrenching pain broke the silence. The face of the one screaming contorted into a grimace of pure agony. Little by little, the scream turned into a whimper. The pain seemed to lessen. The young man in blue sighed in relief, saying that there was finally peace. Then he told the other that he owed him one. With a sly smile, he thought that no matter what, he was the main character. But right after, he collapsed on the floor, completely exhausted. He sat next to the bed, looking at the floor. His energy was completely gone. Meanwhile, outside, the courtyard was full of bodies, the result of a brutal battle. The noise woke up the boy in the bed, who looked around confused. The other young man jumped up, alerted by the sounds coming from outside. People were running desperately, shouting that there were many injured and that they needed help. The boy peeked through the door, his eyes full of terror. He whispered that it was all over. A man pointed out that, from what he could see, there were far fewer casualties than expected. Suddenly, a door slid open. A young man poked his head out, peering curiously into the room. The boy was pensive, analyzing the situation. He imagined his future, working, becoming a doctor, and saving many people. But the scholars seemed to have too many questions. The protagonist turned around, still mulling over his plan. But something didn't add up. He stopped dead in his tracks, full of doubt. He realized that his knowledge was from another world. They could easily mistake him for a spy. He squeezed a cloth in his hand. Nearby, a woman slept in her bed, illuminated by the dim light of some candles. The young man watched her with a serious and determined expression. Then a painful memory came to his mind. His past life as a doctor, protecting 2 children. He remembered the exact moment he was fatally wounded while covering them with his body. In the bed, the woman began to stir, as if having a nightmare. The boy looked at her, his face somber. He had made a decision. A young man with black hair was resting, but his face showed deep pain. Suddenly, a figure burst into the room. The boy woke up with a start, screaming in terror at the sight of a man over him. He was completely in shock, his eyes wide with panic. The stranger looked at him seriously, telling him that they were in serious trouble. His gaze was intense, as if preparing for a battle. Without warning, the man grabbed him roughly by his clothes. But something changed. The young man's eyes turned a threatening red. A dark and violent energy began to emanate from him. In a blur, the boy reversed the roles and grabbed his attacker by the neck. The pressure of his hand was incredibly strong. He lifted him off the ground effortlessly and demanded to know who had sent him. His red eyes glowed with pure fury as he cursed. The attacker, now the victim, was terrified by the boy's immense bloodlust. As he struggled to breathe, he realized that this kid was completely insane. The young man with black hair grabbed him furiously, his red eyes glowing. He ordered him to stop. His gaze was filled with murderous rage. The other man screamed in pain as his arm was twisted brutally. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes widened. A strange power began to awaken. A voice explained that there are geniuses born to kill, and the more they kill, the stronger they become. These natural killers also had an unmatched potential for learning martial arts. But this incredible power came with a terrible disadvantage. In the present, the boy in blue was fighting with all his might. The protagonist gritted his teeth, losing control of his own body. His killer instinct was taking over him. His friend was desperately trying to hold him back, but the young man was completely out of control. The protagonist's strength was overwhelming, throwing his companion across the room. For an instant, a flash of terror and lucidity returned to his eyes. He fought with all his might against the power that was consuming him. Then, something strange and grotesque began to emerge from the table. Out of nowhere, a flaming bottle crashed into something. It was a Molotov cocktail, burning intensely in the darkness. A young man gritted his teeth, enduring unbearable pain. Suddenly, he was surrounded by a hell of fire. He didn't understand anything. Everything happened in an instant. The boy fell to the ground, completely disoriented. Someone was holding him, wondering if the flames had caused this madness. But in his mind, the protagonist was still trapped in the fire, not knowing where he was. There was a sudden movement. His eyes widened, filled with panic and confusion. With incredible strength, the young man grabbed his opponent's wrist, and he launched a direct kick. The blow was brutal, and the other guy screamed in pain. The protagonist had a look of fury and determination. In a second, he turned the tables and pinned him to the ground. An explosion of fire separated them. The protagonist was thrown into the air, coughing. The young man in blue realized he was going to die. Panic took hold of him, but the man in white got up and attacked him with incredible fury. His eyes glowed with an intense and terrifying red. The protagonist remembered the novel, "The more blood, the more his thirst for destruction grew." He had to stop that psychopath somehow. But the attacker's face only showed a smile of pure madness. Desperate, the young man in blue asked him to calm down. It was useless. Rage had completely consumed him. The man in white roared and launched into the attack, with his hands turned into claws. Suddenly, the protagonist's face twisted into a wild grin. The psychopath's hand prepared to deliver the final blow. The two collided in a blur of violence and blood. The man in white stopped, with an expression of surprise on his face. With all his strength, the protagonist resisted, his face full of despair. A painful memory. A young man held someone in his arms, while a harsh truth resonated. Favor or grudge, both bring blood. A solitary tear rolled down his cheek. His face was shattered by anguish and loss. He clung tightly to the inert body, completely heartbroken. The person in his arms gave a last, weak sigh. Back in the present, two men faced off. The one with the ponytail smiled, saying this was just what he expected. A look of confidence and madness spread across his face. But his opponent's eyes shone with a red and menacing light. In an instant, the long-haired man grabbed him by the neck. He lifted him effortlessly, saying that even he would accept the blood parasite. The man with the ponytail was shocked. How could he know that? His expression of superiority completely vanished. His hand trembled, full of disbelief. The attacker held him firmly, demanding answers. But this came from long before. A flashback showed them as children. The little one said that it didn't matter how he knew, and asked what he knew about the demon. The protagonist looked down, a confident smile on his face. His hands moved quickly. The mysterious boy looked down at him, declaring that there were no exceptions for anyone. The young man's expression hardened instantly. It was revealed that the host had to take medicine every 10 days, or a parasite would lay eggs in their body until it exploded. Then, the boy asked what would happen if he told him that he knew a way to expel that parasite from his body. The protagonist looked up, his face now full of seriousness. A smug smile spread across the young master's face. The dark-haired boy wondered aloud how that was possible. His interlocutor told him that it didn't matter who he was. All that mattered was that he knew what the protagonist needed. The young man listened to him, analyzing each word. Both remained silent amidst an aura of red energy. The mysterious boy seemed surprised by the question. In his mind, he realized that the young man had mistaken him for a member of the 8 great demonic clans. The young protagonist maintained a somber and focused expression. Suddenly, the other child said that there was no need to clarify things. For him, it was obvious, since a small child was traveling completely alone in that carriage. The protagonist's eyes widened. He had been found out. The boy in blue grabbed a wooden plank and headed towards the door. He approached the sliding window and violently jammed it from the outside. The young man in white was speechless, totally confused by the situation. The place was ablaze. He asked what he was doing. The other replied that this would help him decide. With a malicious smile, the boy in blue began to shout, asking if anyone was inside. The smoke and fire grew uncontrollably. Panic seized the protagonist. Outside, people were banging on the door, desperately shouting that there was a patient trapped inside. The 2 children stared at each other, separated by the hell that surrounded them. The boy in blue smiled with incredible malice, giving him an ultimatum. He threatened him, asking who they would believe if he shouted that the protagonist was a spy. His gaze hardened, filled with a newfound fury. Suddenly, he remembered. He was the one who carried him and saved him. A vague memory. Him, as a child, in front of a devastating fire. The other boy asked him what the hell he thought he was doing now. Amidst the flames, he demanded that he make a decision once and for all. The fire of the past was reflected in his eyes. His determination solidified in a single instant. A crooked smile appeared on his face. He already knew exactly what he was going to do. But his opponent started sweating, completely nervous. Suddenly, a crash. 2 men screamed in pure panic. The boy in blue was screaming for help desperately. Someone grabbed him forcefully. They covered his mouth, silencing his terror. The young man couldn't believe what he was seeing. His face showed pure shock. All around him, everything was chaos of fire and screams. People were running to evacuate the injured. Amidst the destruction, a small child watched the scene in silence. But there was no fear on his face, just a small, strange smile. The town had been devastated. Smoke and ashes filled the air. The survivors were trying to organize the rescue among the rubble of the houses. The situation was desperate. They shouted to move the most serious first and asked for stretchers. A wounded man screamed in unbearable pain as they carried him. An old man was trying to direct people, trying to bring order to the panic. They quickly prepared the few medical supplies they had, like some bandages. They also gathered clean cloths and some small containers. They had a few bottles with what appeared to be medicine or alcohol. Suddenly, the boy started operating, leaving the adults in shock. He said the intestines were okay, but the boy knew the risk. He had no equipment to prevent infections or to sanitize. Still, he decided he had to do what he could with what he had. The doctors watched totally confused, not understanding what was happening. But the boy was determined. He thought that with alcohol and medicine he could clean the wound. He began to press the wound with all his strength, fighting against time. His face showed absolute concentration. He had to save him. Wringing out a bloody rag, he realized this was all he could do. The bottle of medicine and the dirty rags were left on the floor. Panic seized his face. The situation was critical. He put his hands on the man's chest, applying pressure desperately. Suddenly, he pulled out a needle. He was going to attempt a risky procedure. The other doctors looked at him with their mouths open, completely horrified. The boy leaned over the patient, starting to suture the wound himself. At that moment, 2 important figures arrived at the entrance, guided by a doctor. The white-haired man and his companion watched the scene with complete seriousness. In an instant, they were rushing the patient away. The boy wouldn't leave his side. The truth was shocking. The man had a dagger stuck in his chest. It had pierced his lung. The young boy frantically searched for something on the table, panic in his eyes. Then he grabbed a knife. In the room, a man was bleeding out with a sword in his chest. The doctors couldn't do anything. A little boy was trying to get to him, screaming, but some hands were holding him back tightly. The wounded man, writhing in pain, could barely give an order. With fierce determination, the boy prepared to do the unthinkable. He knew that if he stopped the bleeding, the chances of saving him would increase dramatically. But just as he was about to act, a hand stopped him in his tracks. It was a white-haired woman with a gaze as cold as ice. Ignoring her, the boy tried to cut the wound to remove the sword. His face contorted in a scream of effort and desperation. While the aides panicked, the woman remained completely focused on the task. Suddenly, blood exploded everywhere, splattering those present. The boy stood in shock, his face covered in warm blood. The white-haired woman looked at him furiously, yelling at him amidst the chaos. A man lay dying, his chest bloody. The doctors were desperately trying to save him. Out of nowhere, a figure with golden eyes appeared. He extended his hand with an intense look. The wounded man's blood shot out. The young apprentice saw everything, paralyzed by shock. But the stranger controlled the blood in the air. It was an incredible technique called void control. The strands of blood flew back towards the patient, surrounding the boy in the process. The boy was completely terrified. He felt totally helpless in the middle of the bed, but his fear turned into a new determination. The young apprentice grabbed a nearby knife. The white-haired old man looked at him, surprised by his sudden action. With all his strength, the boy seemed to be resisting something with great effort. Seeing the boy's bravery, the old man smiled with pride. Later, in the infirmary, the atmosphere was somber. The doctors were tending to many wounded. A man approached a doctor. He asked how many people they had managed to save. The doctor informed him that of the 5 who received treatment, 2 of them didn't make it. The old man listened with a somber expression. Beside him, the figure in the hat remained silent. Then the man bowed before the young white-haired man, thanking him deeply. He continued talking to the boy, who looked at him with a serious expression. The person with the scar watched the scene from under his hat, without saying a word. Suddenly, they realized that little Jin Cheon-hee had fallen asleep. It was understandable. The boy was exhausted after the terrible night he'd had. The young man with orange hair carefully lifted him into his arms. Still asleep, the little one clung to him as a tear fell down his cheek. After that day, the story of Jin Cheon-hee's exploits began to spread. The servants of the place kept talking about what had happened, but someone was spying on them through the crack of a door. It was Jin Cheon-hee, secretly eating something. He knew that for his cousin, his existence was a problem. He had to tread carefully. The boy watched as the servants walked away from his door. Suddenly, a voice startled him, asking if he was okay. Some men were whispering about a boy. Apparently, he was a good kid, but they were very surprised by something he had done. They wondered if Cheon-hee was just trying to cover for the boy, since he was so reserved. Meanwhile, someone else was listening to everything while eating. The boy heard that even their leader went to get an ointment for Jin Cheon-hee's neck. The young man kept chewing his food. The men commented that this boy was very lucky, but he wasn't as calm as he seemed. The boy spied on them intently from a half-open door. He heard them talking about the position of clan leader. Suddenly, a little heart shone in his eye. He had an idea. The boy threw the door open, surprising a man inside. The guy was left with a stunned look on his face. Already outside, the long-haired man asked the boy what he wanted from him. The young man, standing on a rock, simply replied, "What?" The guy in black knocked him down in one move. The young man in blue writhed in pain on the ground. The pain was so intense that he couldn't help but scream, but the other didn't seem to care. He stared at him with an expression of total annoyance. With his eyes closed in agony, the young man could barely speak. Now calmer, the young man sat on a rock. He asked if a simple apology would be enough to end this. Suddenly, his expression changed. Now he looked at the other seriously. Then, the guy in black made an unexpected demand. He told him to call him Hyung from now on. The young man couldn't believe it. He yelled, asking if he wanted them to become sworn brothers. His face was a sight. He was sweating from pure disbelief and anger. But the other looked at him with a superior smirk, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He sat down calmly and issued a challenge. If he didn't like the idea, then he should beat him in a fight. The young man was speechless. He couldn't believe the guy's nerve. The other didn't even look at him, pretending to be oblivious. The sky looked calm, but the tension was at its peak. The guy insisted, asking him to try calling him Hyung, and the young man exploded. He grabbed his face and yelled at him with all his might. The tough guy now looked terrified. The young man gritted his teeth, enduring tremendous pain. His expression shifted to one of pure frustration and anger. He closed his eyes for a second, bracing himself. He yelled at the person in front of him, who just stared silently. Shame washed over him, making him blush completely. The boy couldn't take the humiliation anymore. Meanwhile, his companion watched him with a wicked little smile. In the middle of a valley, the one in red finally called him Little Brother. But out of nowhere, someone else appeared behind them. It was a young woman who watched them calmly. She greeted them and asked the savior boy how he had been. The nickname left him completely frozen and speechless. The girl asked if he was a doctor and knew about medicinal herbs. She was explaining something with great excitement, pointing to some plants. The young doctor approached the herbs, examining them with surprise. The young man seemed nervous with a bead of sweat on his cheek. He remembered the warm smile of a woman, a moment full of happiness. It all happened in a quiet garden while they were having tea. A little boy excitedly recounted that he had talked a lot with Gongsun Hyun and Gongsun Yang. Then a mysterious figure approached him and gave him a gift. It was a finely crafted hairpin. The boy couldn't believe it. His expression changed completely. Now he looked serious and determined. He squeezed the object tightly in his hand. The boy told the woman that he had not yet paid his debt for saving her life. She replied that the noble clan had already done so. The woman smiled at him with genuine affection, as if it were nothing. Back in the present, the memory left him breathless, visibly affected. The memory took him to a huge training yard. A woman with an eye patch watched the scene intently. The woman who saved him was also there, with a solemn look. And in the center of it all, the boy prepared himself, with steely determination. The swordsman saw a light flash in his opponent's hands. It was the blue pine spiral sword. His gaze filled with intense concentration. The noble clan's sword style was based on consistency and continuation. The young man moved like a whirlwind of steel. It was said that clans with this style used waves or wind as symbols. The woman launched her own attack with deadly fluidity, and she did it without even breaking a sweat. The swordsman received a cut on his forehead. His opponent watched him with a chilling calm. He couldn't believe the difference in power. He went flying through the air, completely defenseless. She was using the clan's ultimate technique, the preemptive counterattack. Basically, the perfect counter. The warrior landed with brutal force. Her face didn't show a hint of doubt. Her sword gleamed, ready to end the fight. Amidst a flash of light, a figure unleashed a whirlwind of sword slashes. It was a woman, with an expression of absolute focus on her face. Elsewhere, a blue-haired lady was clapping with a radiant smile. She was congratulating someone on becoming a Grand Master. Her two companions joined in the congratulations, calling her Miss. The men bowed deeply, showing their admiration and respect. The woman smiled mischievously, saying that they were flattering her. Near them, a little girl seemed totally intimidated by the men. A young man with black hair was watching her, with a bead of sweat on his forehead. The Grand Master addressed the little girl with a kind smile, but in an instant, her expression turned cold and grim. The girl noticed the change, and her face filled with terror. Suddenly, the woman grabbed her wrist tightly. She violently threw her to the ground as people shouted for help. The young man knelt to help her, while the others just watched in silence. The young man froze, his eyes wide with pure shock. A woman had collapsed right in front of him, completely helpless on the ground. With a look of fury and desperation, the woman clung to someone else with all her might. The scene was chaos. She was hanging onto the other woman, crying, while some guards watched them. The other woman simply closed her eyes, her face filled with a deep, silent sadness. The protagonist saw it all, the tragic scene marking him forever. Sometime later, the group resumed their journey, with the young man lost in thought as he looked at the horizon. They arrived at a bustling market near a delivery base. His companion asked him if he had any money, but the boy revealed a huge wad of bills. He'd been given a good amount of cash. With money in hand, the first thing they did was buy street food. The young man happily ate, but his companion yelled at him, asking if he thought he was the older brother. He reminded him that they had agreed he would be the older brother, and this is what they do. His friend wasn't amused by that logic at all. Still, he ate the food they bought him while still angry. Food is food, right? Suddenly, the protagonist's attention was caught by a tanghulu stand, getting instantly excited. A little boy happily bought candy, but his companion looked at him with concern. Suddenly, the young man's expression changed to one of total surprise. A man grabbed him from behind. The guy looked furious and ready for violence. The boy turned around, startled by the commotion. The people around were also alarmed. The little one wondered if his friend had already gotten into trouble again. The protagonist couldn't believe what was happening. His eyes were wide with shock. The thug wound up a punch with all his might, ready to crush him without mercy. But in an instant, the young man's gaze hardened. A red glow appeared in his eye, and he counterattacked first. He landed a brutal blow on the man, asking how he dared. The thug screamed in pain, taking the full force of the impact to the face. The attack was so fast and violent that the man couldn't even react. Another guy appeared out of nowhere, launching a side attack to help his friend. But the protagonist dodged the blow with chilling calm, without even looking at him. His eyes shone with an intense light. He was about to finish the fight. And he connected a final blow with explosive and devastating force. The man on the ground was completely terrified. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, his face contorted with pure panic. The protagonist launched into the attack. His eyes glowed with uncontrollable fury. A brutal punch landed directly on his face. The guy went flying through the air. The young man stood alone amidst the destruction. The bodies of his enemies lay around him. The townspeople watched, completely horrified. They couldn't comprehend the power they had just witnessed. But in the protagonist's mind, a painful memory began to surface. He remembered someone smiling at him fondly, a moment of peace and happiness. He saw himself as a child, happy, holding some candy. Back in the present, his hair hid his face. The anger returned, more intense than ever. Suddenly, the memory turned into a nightmare. The child was violently attacked. Blood splattered everywhere. His innocent face was filled with pain, and he was mercilessly crushed against the ground. That was the origin of his fury. A brutal punch connected, sending blood flying through the air. The attack was swift and merciless. The fist crashed into his face with devastating force. The protagonist's eyes blazed with fury as he unleashed his power. The impact caused the antagonist to stagger violently. Blood splattered on the floor of the carriage. The onlookers couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were horrified. Even the older man was stunned by the brutality of the scene. A child screamed, completely terrified by the violence. The victim lay on the ground, beaten and bloody. The protagonist loomed over the fallen Yoha Ryan, showing no mercy, and he launched another punch straight to the face. But suddenly, something made him stop dead in his tracks. His eyes burned with a primal fury, a murderous instinct taking over him. The child remembered the protagonist's true nature, a born killer who craves blood. The boy was in shock. His natural killer instinct craved it. But what he saw was a sweet? The long-haired man looked horrified. He asked him to come a little closer with obvious distrust. The boy gritted his teeth, determined to act. The tanghulu was melting from the heat. There was no time to waste. So, without a second thought, he shoved the whole sweet into his mouth. The man instantly blushed, overwhelmed by the flavor. The boy couldn't believe what had just happened. In the distance, some elders watched. They had to give him other instincts besides killing. They were grateful that because he was young, the sweets had worked to calm him down. Suddenly, the man collapsed. The boy, scared, yelled at him to stay still. The man looked weak, but strangely at peace. The boy looked at him with a mix of worry and determination. He held him tightly, getting stained with the melted candy. Then, with bright eyes, he called him Sir. The man looked at him, confused. Woon Ji-sung, the delivery service leader, approached worriedly. He was carrying a baby and asked if they were okay. The elder replied that they were just taking a break. The baby, with wide eyes, stretched out its little hand. The young man smiled and approached the little one. Their hands met in an instant. Woon Ji-sung laughed with joy at the sight. The young man was surprised to hear a name. The baby seemed to recognize him and babbled excitedly. The man said that the baby recognized his savior. Then he offered the child to the young master to hold. The young man hugged the baby with a warm smile. Meanwhile, his companion watched the scene in silence. Woon Ji-sung was happy. He said that the baby was healthy and that Mr. Dam Jagang looked happy. The man turned to talk to the elder. The elder listened with a very serious expression. But Dam Jagang only had eyes for the little one in his arms. An older man thanked the young man. He said that thanks to him, he had returned safe and sound and would no longer be greedy. But the young man's companion seemed to doubt his words. Suddenly, the baby they were carrying grabbed her finger. The tender gesture took her by surprise. For an instant, her hard gaze softened. The baby looked at her with total innocence. The young man smiled at the heartwarming scene. But the woman's expression returned to being cold and distant. The scene changed, showing them both walking alone along a mountain path. She told him that he had the qualities of an older brother. The comment seemed to surprise the young man, but she continued, saying that justice is just an excuse for murder. The boy turned to look at her, completely serious. Her gaze was intense and full of a dark conviction. She confessed that killing was the only thing she knew how to do, and the only thing that excited her. Her face looked somber, lost in her thoughts. But then, a memory brought a slight smile to her face. She remembered a happy day when the boy called him older brother and laughed. He thought that this wasn't like in the novels. He called himself an assassin to be humble, but the reality was different. In his memories, they both rested silently on some rocks. The young man looked at him with an expression of pure concern. But the swordsman's gaze was serious, full of heavy determination. The boy asked him if he really wanted to leave, warning him that it would be a very difficult journey. The young man looked sad, accepting his companion's inevitable decision. Suddenly, the long-haired man asked him why he didn't ask about his obsession with the demonic force. Their eyes met in a moment of intense tension. The young man lowered his head, not knowing what to answer. Then, the boy told him that one day he would teach him how to remove the blood parasite because he was his little brother. A smile of relief and gratitude lit up the swordsman's face, and with a smile, the young man said goodbye, leaving him to start his own path. In the middle of the crowd, a young man walked with his head down and a lost look. He contemplated the horizon, feeling that he had completely lost the purpose of his life, his eyes fixed on a piece of paper, analyzing the information. Suddenly, his face filled with an expression of total disbelief. A white-haired man calmly asked him if he wasn't interested. The master's expression was serene, almost ethereal, as he waited for an answer. The young man finally asked what he would learn if he became his disciple. But the answer he received left him completely paralyzed and sweating cold. This man was the legendary divine Dr. White Dragon, and he suffered from a terminal illness. Between them, a bowl of medicine steamed on the table. The protagonist thought that if the doctor died, all his immense fortune would be his. He held the cup, a bold idea beginning to form in his mind. Out of nowhere, the doctor looked at him with an expression of absolute surprise. The boy stated that, although his condition was innate, a cure was not impossible, and at that moment, a shocking truth hit him like a lightning bolt. The protagonist's eyes widened, full of terror. Out of nowhere, an overwhelming bloodlust flooded the place. The white-haired man wondered why the red-haired young man was emitting that murderous aura. The redhead's gaze was pure hatred. The protagonist began to sweat cold, completely paralyzed by fear. The white-haired sage ordered the other to stop. The young man slumped into his chair, trying to catch his breath. The redhead, frustrated, screamed with all his might. The white-haired man began to speak. He said it was like giving new hope to a terminal cancer patient. The protagonist listened to him with a very serious expression. The wise man explained that hope can be much crueler than despair. Then, he took a sip of tea with incredible calm. A new determination shone in the young man's eyes. The tea steamed in the cup. The white-haired man seemed thoughtful, while the redhead remained annoyed behind him. The protagonist exploded, unleashing a contained fury that shook him completely. But the white-haired man stopped him dead with a single word. The master remained calm, with an almost imperceptible smile on his face. The young man was pensive, reflecting on the situation. The white-haired man stared at him, evaluating each of his expressions. The boy confronted him, asking which of his personalities was the real one. The master's hand rested calmly on the table, showing no tension. The white-haired man told him to speak first, that he was willing to listen. But he gave him a warning. If he found out he was lying, he would withdraw his offer to be his master. The protagonist's eyes gleamed with a new determination. Then, the young man got up and left the place. His face showed an unwavering resolution as he walked away. He walked alone along the stone path. Meanwhile, the assistant told the master that the boy had threatened him with death. Upon hearing this, the master smiled, strangely pleased with the news. With an intense look, the young man declared that they were fighting a losing battle from the start. The white-haired person was in shock. Meanwhile, the orange-haired man couldn't stand the tension. The boy said he would only ask one question. The white-haired individual listened in silence. A painful memory came to his mind. Martial artists dying for resentment and justice. He wondered what good his actions were if people would hurt each other again. Those old doubts were tormenting him again. Standing, he admitted that the boy had seen through his doubts, feeling relieved. Then, he confessed that he had fallen in love with him at first sight. The orange-haired man couldn't believe what he was hearing. He thought that perhaps he had a lot to learn from the boy and that he would be the disciple. The man accepted this strange possibility. The white-haired person looked at him with a new determination. A calm smile appeared on his face. His doubts were finally gone. An orange-haired man looked down, sweating and clearly annoyed by something. He complained to his master, saying he didn't like that kid at all. What kind of brat says he won't kill his master in peace? The senior disciple couldn't contain himself and exploded with rage, but the white-haired master just smiled calmly, as if he understood everything. He explained that if the boy hadn't been so bold, he wouldn't have even accepted him. The scene changed to a memory by a lake. The master asked the boy if he really said he wouldn't kill him easily. The young boy stared at him and confirmed that he had. The old man told him that, in return, he would have to make him a promise too. Being his disciple meant he would have a lot to study. Out of nowhere, the master grabbed his head. The boy didn't understand what was happening. An intense blue energy began to shine in the old man's hand. The young disciple looked up, totally surprised by the power he felt. The light grew stronger and stronger, completely enveloping him. His eyes widened, full of amazement and a little fear. And then, an explosion of pure energy burst from the master's hand. Suddenly, the young boy was thrown into the air with brutal force. His eyes widened, unable to believe what he was seeing. The impact left a deep, cracked crater in the ground. The white-haired man smiled arrogantly. He said it took skill to do that, and he had done it all with a single finger, as if firing an invisible bullet. The protagonist watched him, the light of the attack reflected in his gaze. A beam of pure energy shot out, spinning with destructive power. The attack pierced a huge rock as if it were paper. The hole was still glowing, proof of its incredible power. The white-haired man maintained a serious and calculating expression. He thought that attack was more accurate than a sniper, and achieved effortlessly. He explained to the boy that being his heir also meant inheriting the Jeagle clan. The young man was sweating cold. The pressure of that responsibility was immense. Despite everything, the boy accepted with determination, calling him Sir. Thus, master and disciple began their journey together. A mysterious voice told him there was one last thing. The young man asked, confused, what it was. Suddenly, a memory began to form in his mind. It was him, but as a child. His eyes widened as he relived that moment. He remembered an enigmatic figure with long white hair. The child was in front of this person, listening very carefully. With all his strength, the little boy promised that he would do everything in his power. The white-haired figure watched him with a calm and deep gaze. The memory felt so vivid, as if he were there again. They were alone in a clearing, and the boy awaited an important order.